Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our new show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Joining me this week is Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked, and Jonathon Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond. Good show for you this week. We have an update on Sony's plans for PS5 backward compatibility. We'll also have poll results from last week and a new poll for you. But first, with all aspects of our life and the entertainment industry being impacted by the coronavirus epidemic, many are wondering if the launch of next-gen consoles could be affected or delayed. Now, Jonathon, I know that this week you reached out to several industry analysts about this topic. What do they seem to think? Could the PS5 or Xbox Series X be delayed into 2021?
So yeah, I spoke to 6 different analysts, all focused, of course, in the video game industry, taking a look at where we stand right now in relation to COVID-19 and where we could go. And one thing I do want to preface is basically every analyst I spoke to sort of gave the caveat, this is so unprecedented in the world, and especially in the gaming world right now, that any prediction or prognostication or a guess about how this all may go could change greatly depending on how COVID-19 turns out to impact the world, and especially different countries where manufacturing goes on and where these game developers and publishers are located. So that's something to keep in mind. But when speaking to all of these analysts, a lot of them came away with sort of the same, basically under the same agreement and idea that it's likely not going to be delayed. You know, the release of Xbox Series X and PS5 likely will still hit in 2020, but the biggest possibility we'll probably see is that there will be a significant shortage or a lack of availability of these consoles due to manufacturing limitation.
I see. So no one that you spoke to outright said, yes, I think the next-gen consoles are going to be delayed?
So from everyone we spoke to, a lot of people were saying they're uncertain, but we did speak to DFC Intelligence, who had previously published some of their beliefs and statements about what's going on with the gaming industry. And that group does believe there is likely to be some sort of delay impact. They said at some point, if product is limited or price of components becomes too high, Sony and Microsoft will have to make a tough decision about whether to launch in very short supply or delay launch until the supply chain is comfortably running. We do not expect this decision to be made in the short term, but they do expect there to be some sort of major impact. Perhaps of any of the analysts we spoke to, they expect there to be the biggest impact going forward for these consoles.
Interesting. And so for the analysts that believe scarcity is a greater probability than delay, what do they think the reasons are for that? They think they are manufacturing may have been delayed, but things are going to be able to ramp up again soon.
Yeah, so it's largely dependent on, especially factories in China, which has seen their curve, as far as we know, of the COVID-19 infections start to plateau a bit. They seem to not be getting cases day by day. But speaking to us, Daniel Ahmad from Nico Partners gave us a statement that they gave to all of their partners and their clients as well. And they said, the closure of factories since the Lunar New Year and the slow return to work for many will result in minor global console shortages in Q2 2020 and beyond. We do not expect significant shortages in Q2 as console sales are seasonal and most sell-through takes place toward the end of the year. If the coronavirus outbreak is contained within the next month or two, then we would expect console manufacturers to be able to meet demand for the holiday quarter. But for current gen consoles and next gen launches, they continued on. If manufacturers are unable to operate at full capacity before the end of Q2 2020, we could see an impact on the launch of next gen console launches, with either limited supply or delayed releases becoming the likely outcome. So they're essentially saying that if things don't get back to normal by the end of Q2 2020, which we are currently just getting into the beginning of, that'll kick into place basically with the start of April. If things aren't getting back to normal by the end of Q2, which is in another 3 months, then we could see some significant delays or shortages.
I see. Now, Ryan, I believe Microsoft commented on this very topic this week. What did they have to say?
Yeah, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, basically saying all systems go for right now. So as far as they know, as far as they're suggesting as of now, there is no delay, certainly no delay, and possibly no shortage at hand. So good to see Microsoft at least publicly staying the course. I'm sure that they're investigating all sorts of contingency plans at this point, as no doubt Sony is. But for now, we proceed towards holiday, and we just wait to hear. Now, I wouldn't at all be surprised if both manufacturers, both Sony and Microsoft, hold off on giving their release date specifically as long as they possibly can, in case they need to push up maybe to the Black Friday holiday. We saw last week Microsoft on some of their global Xbox.com websites. There was on the Series X page at the bottom, it said coming Thanksgiving 2020, which when we followed up with Microsoft, they said that was a website error and not the actual release date. So whether that's one of those things where it actually is, or maybe it could become the release date, because realistically, Black Friday probably is the farthest they could push. Either one of them could push and still have a meaningful big launch this fall.
I can't imagine they would miss that shopping window of Black Friday.
Exactly.
Yeah, I did want to say we spoke to all of the analysts I actually reached out to before both the Series X and PS5 tech reveals that we had in recent days, and then reached out to them again for clarification, especially after both of those reveals seemed to insinuate that a holiday 2020 launch is still to come. And most of them, even if they were uncertain beforehand, seem to feel that a 2020 holiday launch is definitely in the books for at least some amount of a release. Whether or not it's a severely limited amount of consoles, we'll have to see. But I also spoke to Spike Trap, which is an analyst firm who sort of they measure engagement around topics on social media and videos and various platforms where people are talking, and they measure sentiment and engagements and whether people are happy or frustrated about a certain video game topic. And interestingly, they had pointed out to me in their data when they were looking around the idea that a delay was starting to be talked about. We saw on IGN commenters, and obviously in the office, we were discussing the possibility. Interestingly, there wasn't a significant spike in chatter about the delay of consoles among fans. So fans didn't seem to be particularly worried online, at least before these tech reveals happened. They said the highest amount, overall within March, this was before the start of this past week, they only saw about 1,300 online engagements total around the idea of a delay, specifically after DFC Intelligence first published their thoughts on the possibility of a delay. Most people seem to still just be expecting these consoles to come in the holiday.
Is there any world where only one of these consoles is released this holiday? Like, say Microsoft is totally ready. Could Sony afford to let them go first and go a few months later into early 2021?
I think Sony could. Sony could afford to do that, but Microsoft can't. There's just no way. Sony's had such a big lead this entire generation. That story is well told. That I'm sure Microsoft is going to try to beat Sony to market, even if it's by a week or two this fall. But yeah, I can't see Microsoft allowing Sony to get out of any sort of head start.
Even though Sony is in the lead and probably could have two of the two, I don't think they will let it happen either. Similarly to Ryan, I do think they'll maybe at best allow Microsoft to get a week or two head start, but I don't think they will miss a 2020 release date if Microsoft sticks to that. And in fact, one of the analysts we spoke to, Dr. Serkan Toto of Canton Games, said, quote, "I was skeptical about the PS5 release schedule because of Sony's silence at first, but as Microsoft already reconfirmed holidays 2020 as the launch date, there is no other way for Sony then to keep up. They will not want to watch their top competitor gobble up the holidays while they sit on the sidelines with the PS4.
So if we're seeing a console launch with severe shortages, kind of like the way we did in 2006 with the Wii, what is that going to look like in the year 2020? People are, reselling them at extremely high prices on eBay and on Craigslist. People are camping outside of Targets, waiting for them to open to see if they've restocked. Do you guys remember that? What that was like trying to get a Wii?
Yeah.
I camped out at Circuit City a couple of times, not overnight, but like really early in the morning, and waited a while. It took me probably a month. They would hold shipments for every Sunday back when they would have the Sunday circulars. The new ad for the week, and they would have a certain amount, and boy, yeah, there were some big lines for the Wii at big box retailers back in the day.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna age myself, but yeah, my dad bought it as a Christmas gift for me that year, and he
That's
said
great.
basically from the week the Wii launched, he was going into stores every week until basically mid-December and lucked out on finding a Wii.
Well, last week our whole show was all about the full spec reveals of each console. We have that now; it's all out there in the wild, and we polled the IGN audience. We asked you, after those reveals for both next-gen consoles, which are you most excited for now? And now we have those results. 43% of you said PlayStation 5. Still excited for a PlayStation 5, and that's compared to 26% who said they were all in on Xbox Series X, and 13% said they'll get both. So after Microsoft seemingly doing everything right, Sony being a little less powerful and a little more awkward with its reveals, the IGN audience is still leaning towards PlayStation. Does that surprise you both?
Not at all. That's what the power of the games do. The Sony first party portfolio that, it's a well told story, a frequently told story, but that's really it. I mean, you've got a hugely successful console, over 100 million installed base, that is cranked out just so many wonderful exclusive titles that really is. Microsoft can do everything right, as I feel like they pretty well have so far. They've really done a lot of things that are very consumer focused, consumer friendly, and they've got to show the games. I think this year Microsoft by design will just announce a lot of what they're working on and all these new first party studios, whether the heavily rumored Fable reboot, whatever the initiative is doing, their big new quadruple A studio down in Santa Monica. So it's the games. To circle back, I'm not surprised at those statistics, because when you've created a first party portfolio as good as Sony has, why would a gamer walk away from that unless there's a massive inferiority situation on the console side, and that does not appear to be the case.
We implicitly know, even though Sony hasn't announced, I completely agree with Ryan. After the PS4 generation, we're expecting a Spider-Man 2, a sequel to God of War, a sequel to Horizon, a sequel to all of these major games that were some of the best-selling games of the generation, some of the best first-party games sales-wise that Sony has ever had. Spider-Man has become the best-selling PS4 exclusive and the best-selling superhero game of all time. Horizon, a brand new IP, sold 10 million plus copies. These are franchises that definitely really, really obviously connected with the PlayStation audience, but we really only got ever one entry in all of these franchises. And I think those fan bases that do read IGN and do come to find out all the news about these games can't wait to find out more about those series. And so the expectation is PS5 is going to be the only place to play them.
We have more information on a topic we touched on last week, which is PS5's backwards compatibility. In Mark Cerny's talk, he said they were looking at having almost the top 100 most popular PS4 games backwards compatible on PS5 on launch day, and that's all he had to say about that. But after, since the talk, Sony has clarified that eventually almost all of PlayStation 4 games will be backwards compatible on PlayStation 5. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yeah, so to give the official language the way they stated it, because even that's a little bit murky in terms of the rollout of this, but they said, we believe that the overwhelming majority of the 4,000 PS4 titles will be playable on PS5. We're expecting backward compatible titles will run at a boosted frequency on PS5 so that they can benefit from higher or more stable frame rates and potentially higher resolutions. We're evaluating games on a title-by-title basis to spot any issues that need adjustment. Mark Cerny provided a snapshot into the top 100 most played PS4 titles, demonstrating how well our backward compatibility efforts are going. We have already tested hundreds of titles and are preparing to test thousands more. So the implication is that they've at least figured out a few hundred titles, and that from that top 100, the majority of those will be available on PS4 when it comes, or PS5 when it comes out.
But I think that's the key difference between Microsoft and Sony. That's really the narrative, the tale of the next gen story right now, as of we sit here at the end of Q1 2020. Sony's been pretty vague and just telling, like, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna have this. Microsoft has been showing everything. They've shown backwards compatibility, they've shown ray tracing, they've shown loading times, they've shown quick resume, all these features that Sony has only talked about. And it's not to say that PlayStation's not going to do them. They're almost certainly going to do them. But that's really, it's the clarity from Microsoft versus the sort of vagueness a bit from Sony. As we sit here now, that's all going to change as time goes on, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, and also the Xbox Series X is going to be backwards compatible with every generation of Xbox, going back to the original one.
Yes.
Where Sony's only talking about PS4 so far. Isn't that right?
that is the frustrating thing, is they won't give us a yes or no, and so that leads to a lot of speculation among fans, and obviously can probably lead to some people being disappointed down the road if PS2 and PS3 and PlayStation 1 games aren't backward compatible. But they haven't addressed those generations. They don't seem to be addressing them, at least publicly. Obviously, I would love if all those generations are backward compatible, but my guess would be that they will put the focus into bringing some of those libraries to continue to be in the PlayStation Now fold and try to build that streaming and download platform that they offer as a alternative to backward compatibility.
Yeah, in my 17 plus years of doing games media, it's generally speaking, if a company is not saying that they're not outright saying they're going to do something when they're asked about it, they're probably not going to do it. So I think it's, hey, it's great. It'll be great to have the PS4 library and hopefully most of it. But yeah, I would not hold out any hope whatsoever for PS3 and prior to that being playable on PS5. And if it does happen, hey, be pleasantly surprised, but set your expectations accordingly.
All right. Well, dear viewers, we have a new poll for you to vote on this week and for us to discuss next week. If supply is limited, how far will you go to get a next-gen console this holiday season? Will you camp out overnight? Will you pay the eBay tax? Or will you just wait until they're easy to buy from Amazon? Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we will share the results with you next week. And that about does it for this episode of Next Gen Console Watch 2020. Thank you, Ryan and Jonathan. We will be back next Friday at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more PS5 and Xbox Series X news and rumors. We'll see you then.